My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 6 years, I've worked as an executive assistant at one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. I knew every corner of that company, every routine, every secret. And yet, to them, I was invisible, just a secretary. They called me that with a smirk, as if my job title defined my worth. Fetching coffee, scheduling meetings, fixing their mistakes. I did it all, with a polite smile and perfect efficiency. Behind closed doors, they laughed. "Lauren's great at organizing," they would say during after-hours drinks. "But she'll never understand the real business." I heard every word. Worse, I felt every dismissal. They would toss contracts at me without explanations, joke about complex deals I wouldn't get, and leave me out of important discussions entirely. My boss, Victor Lang, was the worst. He was arrogant, ruthless, and utterly convinced of his superiority. "Stick to what you're good at," he said once when I asked about attending a leadership training workshop. "Leave the big moves to the big players." I swallowed the insult and smiled. What he didn't know was that I was already playing a bigger game. Every night after they left, I stayed late. I read everything. Contracts, merger proposals, internal audits. I taught myself finance, law, and corporate governance. When Victor and the senior partners got sloppy, I took notes, literal ones. The way they manipulated financial reports to inflate profits. The way they bullied junior staff into covering mistakes. The quiet but constant ethical violations they thought no one noticed. I noticed. I documented. I prepared. The tipping point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Victor barged into my office, furious over a failed deal. "You missed an error in the documents," he barked. "Because of you, we lost millions." That wasn't true. He was the one who ignored my flagged email. But it didn't matter. In front of the entire team, he humiliated me. "Maybe you're just not cut out for this level," he sneered. "Stick to ordering lunch, Lauren." That night, sitting alone in my tiny apartment, I stared at the years of evidence I had quietly gathered. Fraud, harassment, tax evasion. Enough to destroy reputations and sink careers. I realized something powerful in that moment. They thought I was weak. They thought I was clueless. But they were wrong. I didn't fight back immediately. No, that wasn't my style. I waited. I watched. I let them become comfortable again. Meanwhile, I consulted with a discreet lawyer and outlined my case. Whistleblower protections, corporate misconduct, securities fraud, everything lined up perfectly. I knew that when the time came, I wouldn't just expose them, I would leave them no place to run. My opportunity arrived faster than expected. A major client filed a lawsuit accusing the firm of fraud. Panic spread like wildfire. The partners scrambled, desperate to cover their tracks. Victor, red-faced and sweating, called me into his office. "Lauren," he said, voice low and urgent, "you've always been loyal. Help us clean this up. There's a bonus in it for you." Loyalty? Bonus? They had no idea how far past that I was. I smiled, nodded, and pretended to help. But behind the scenes, I finalized everything with my lawyer. Timing was everything. When Victor and his team thought they were safe, I pulled the trigger. Anonymous packages were sent to regulatory agencies and key shareholders. Emails, documents, recordings, everything carefully laid out and irrefutable. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Overnight, headlines exploded. Top law firm under investigation for massive fraud scandal. Victor and the other partners were suspended pending investigation. Stockholders held emergency meetings. Clients fled. And me? I sat quietly at my desk, sipping tea, as the walls crumbled around them. They didn't know it yet. But the woman they dismissed as just a secretary was about to become the only person capable of saving the company they destroyed. The chaos that followed the scandal was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Overnight, the law firm's proud reputation shattered. Headlines screamed about fraud, misconduct, and criminal investigations. Senior partners who once strutted through the office like kings suddenly vanished, suspended pending review. Victor Lang, the man who loved barking orders at me and calling me just a secretary, was now hiding behind his lawyer, begging for mercy. The firm was on the verge of collapse. Clients fled. Junior employees sent out resumes in panic. The Board of directors, stunned and desperate, called for an emergency meeting. I sat quietly through it all. Calm, patient, waiting. I knew they would eventually realize the truth. No one left in the company knew how to run it. For years, they had relied on me for everything: schedules, logistics, project management. I knew the clients, the vendors, the procedures. I knew which cases mattered and which were falling apart. More importantly, I knew how to keep things from completely falling apart. Sure enough, just 2 days after the partners were removed, I received the call. A senior board member, voice filled with nervous urgency, asked me to come in. "Lauren, we need stability right now," he said. "You know this company better than anyone. We'd like you to step in, temporarily, as acting operations director." Acting operations director. Not CEO, not yet. But it was the first step. I accepted with grace, hiding my satisfaction behind polite professionalism. Over the next few weeks, I transformed the company from the inside out. I cleaned house. Every toxic manager, every unethical supervisor, gone. I rebuilt trust with our clients personally, meeting with them face-to-face and promising transparency and integrity. Employees who had been terrified were suddenly inspired. I created new policies to ensure accountability and fairness, empowering the very people who had once been ignored and belittled. Slowly but surely, the company stabilized. Profits didn't return overnight, but confidence did. And that, in the corporate world, was more valuable than anything. What surprised everyone most was how natural I was in the role. Where Victor had ruled through intimidation, I led through strategy and empathy. Where the partners had schemed and manipulated, I communicated openly. I wasn't pretending to be one of them. I was redefining what leadership meant. 3 months later, the board convened again. This time, there was no emergency. There was only admiration. One by one, the directors thanked me for saving the company. They praised my vision, my composure, my ability to earn back trust. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat and said the words I had been waiting for. "Lauren, the company needs permanent leadership. You've already proven you can handle the responsibility. We would like to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer." CEO. I accepted with a steady voice and a confident handshake, though inside I was screaming with victory. The news spread fast. Employees cheered. Clients congratulated me. Industry insiders were stunned. As for Victor and the disgraced former partners, they heard the news from their lawyers. The woman they had mocked, underestimated, and dismissed as just a secretary was now running the empire they destroyed. One afternoon, while I was finalizing contracts in my new office, Victor's old office, Amanda, one of my closest colleagues, knocked gently and stepped in. She looked almost embarrassed as she asked, "So, are you going to fire them?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked to the window and looked out over the Seattle skyline. Power wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about sending a message. Still, I knew what needed to be done. "I'm not firing them," I said calmly, turning to face her. "The board is. They'll receive formal termination notices by tomorrow morning. Their careers here are over." Amanda's eyes widened, then she smiled knowingly. Poetic. That night, as I sat alone in my office, now decorated in soft neutrals and filled with awards and thank you notes from staff, I reflected on everything. They had underestimated me. They had used me. They had thrown me aside like I didn't matter. But now, they couldn't ignore me. I was the boss. I was the decision maker. I was everything they believed I could never be. Lauren Mitchell, CEO, not just a secretary. Not anymore. 6 weeks after I officially became CEO, things at the firm were thriving. Clients who once threatened to leave had returned after seeing how quickly and efficiently the company was being restructured. Our profits stabilized, and for the first time in years, the office culture felt alive. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells around arrogant bosses. People smiled. They collaborated. They believed in what we were building. But not everyone was doing so well. Victor Lang and the other disgraced partners had become pariahs in the legal world. Their reputations were ruined, their careers destroyed. No reputable firm would touch them. Word spread quickly in our industry. Corporate fraud, even whispers of it, was career-ending. One rainy Monday morning, as I was preparing for a quarterly meeting, my assistant popped her head in. "You're not going to believe who's here," she said quietly, almost amused. I didn't have to guess. "Victor," I replied calmly. She nodded. "And Daniel and Greg. They're downstairs asking for a meeting. They say it's urgent." I leaned back in my chair, processing that for a moment. Part of me wanted to tell security to throw them out, but I was curious. I had spent years sitting quietly while they held all the power. Now, the roles were reversed. "Send them up," I said simply. When they entered my office, the energy was completely different from the old days. No arrogance, no smugness, just desperation. Victor, who once barked orders at me and mocked my ambitions, looked like a shell of the man he used to be. His expensive suit hung loose on his thinner frame. His eyes darted nervously around the office. "Lauren," he began, forcing a tight smile. "Thank you for seeing us. We wanted to discuss a proposal." I said nothing. I simply gestured for them to sit. They all rushed to fill the silence. Daniel spoke next. "Look, we made mistakes. We admit that. But no one knows this business like we do. We can help. We're ready to return in advisory roles, nothing major. Just think about how much stronger the firm could be with all of us back together." Back together? I fought the urge to laugh out loud. They weren't offering help. They were begging for lifelines. Victor leaned forward, voice softening, as if he still thought charm would work. "Lauren, we built this place. We guided it for decades. You've done an incredible job holding it together, but we can offer you experience you don't have yet. Let's put the past behind us." That's when I spoke, voice steady and cold. "You're right about one thing, Victor. You built this place, and then you almost destroyed it with your greed and arrogance." The room fell silent. I stood, walking slowly around the desk until I stood directly across from them. They shifted uncomfortably. "You called me just a secretary. You humiliated me. You ignored my warnings. You made me invisible," I continued, my voice sharper now. "But while you played kings, I was the one who kept this company running. And now, I rebuilt it without you." Victor's face tightened. He tried one last pathetic attempt. "Lauren, be reasonable. You can't seriously think—" I cut him off. "I'm not thinking, Victor. I know. There's no place for you here, not as advisors, not as consultants, not as anything. This company has moved on, without you, and we're better for it." Daniel tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Meeting's over," I said firmly. Security appeared moments later to escort them out. As they shuffled out of the office, defeated and humiliated, I felt no guilt, only satisfaction. They left behind careers in ruins while I stood tall in the very office they once refused to even let me sit in during important meetings. That afternoon, word spread quickly. Employees whispered, smiled, and celebrated quietly. Everyone knew what had happened. The kings had come crawling back, and the queen slammed the door shut in their faces. I returned to my desk, pulled up our expansion plan, and dove back into work. There was no time to dwell on the past. I had bigger plans ahead. Lauren Mitchell, CEO. The woman they once underestimated now held all the power, and she wasn't done yet. In the months that followed their desperate visit, the firm, under my leadership, transformed. What once was a toxic boys' club had evolved into a thriving, respected company known for integrity, transparency, and innovation. Our client list grew rapidly as word spread. Major corporations, tech startups, and even former clients who had fled during the scandal came back. They weren't just interested in working with us, they were eager. We were no longer the firm run by arrogant, old men clinging to outdated power. We were new, dynamic, and forward-thinking. I led the change, not just from the executive suite, but on the ground with my team. I implemented mentorship programs, created leadership opportunities for junior staff, and prioritized ethics and fairness in every department. Employees who had once quietly counted down the minutes each day now thrived. They stayed late not out of fear, but because they believed in what we were building together. We hosted charity events, We started legal workshops to support women and minority-owned businesses. The company became a beacon in the community, a far cry from the secretive, self-serving place it had been under Victor's reign. Meanwhile, outside our walls, Victor Lang and his former partners were struggling, and everyone knew it. News of their downfall had circulated through the industry like wildfire. They became infamous, the cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and at networking events. I heard through mutual contacts that Victor had tried starting his own consulting firm. It flopped within months. Clients refused to work with him. His reputation was toxic. At one conference, a peer casually mentioned over cocktails, "Victor? Lang? Oh, you mean the guy who let his secretary outsmart him and take his empire?" Laughter erupted around the table. I wasn't there to hear it in person, but the story made its way back to me. They weren't laughing at me anymore. They were laughing at him. Daniel and Greg didn't fare much better. They attempted to merge with smaller firms, but nobody wanted them. Their names had become synonymous with scandal and failure. They had spent years mocking me, reducing me to just a secretary. Now, they couldn't even get meetings. One afternoon, Amanda, my HR director now and one of the few remaining from the old regime, brought me a folder filled with resumes. She paused and smirked. "You'll want to see who applied for the new compliance manager position." I glanced at the name on the file and almost laughed out loud. Greg, one of the men who used to hand me coffee orders like I was beneath him, was now applying to work under my leadership. "Desperate, isn't he?" Amanda commented. "Should I even bother scheduling an interview?" I shook my head, smiling calmly. "No, some doors stay closed forever." That night, as I reviewed expansion plans for our 6th office, yes, 6th, I reflected on how far things had come. The firm was now considered one of the top 5 in the Pacific Northwest. Our new tagline, "Where integrity meets expertise," was displayed proudly in every office. I had become a respected figure in the industry, often invited to speak at conferences about leadership and overcoming adversity. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about proving that resilience and vision would always triumph over arrogance and entitlement. But I won't lie. Knowing that Victor and the others were out there, watching from the sidelines as I built everything they said I never could, that was a reward all on its own. They used to say my job was to support them. Now, their names were forgotten while mine was etched into the company's history as the woman who saved and redefined everything. Lauren Mitchell, CEO. The name they couldn't ignore. The woman they couldn't stop. And soon, the entire country would know exactly why. Because I wasn't finished yet. 1 year after taking over as CEO, my life looked nothing like the modest routine I once lived. Sugar and Bloom had been my dream before, but now my law firm became the dream reborn in a new form, bigger and more powerful than I had ever imagined. We had expanded from Seattle to San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. Within a year, we became one of the fastest-growing firms in America. Our focus on ethics, innovation, and client trust earned us national awards. News outlets ran headlines, like "The CEO Who Saved a Fallen Giant" and "Lauren Mitchell, from Assistant to Industry Icon." Invitations poured in, speaking engagements, panels, leadership summits. They didn't want to hear about the firm. They wanted to hear about me. About the woman who went from scheduling meetings and making coffee runs to sitting at the head of the table. I never chased the spotlight, but when it found me, I embraced it with grace. Interviews became routine. I talked about resilience, about recognizing your own worth even when others don't. I shared my mantra openly. They can overlook you, they can mock you, but they can't erase you if you know your value. While I thrived, the ghosts of the past lingered in the shadows. Victor, Daniel, and Greg had all but disappeared from the industry. No one wanted to associate with them. They became corporate punchlines, their names mentioned only in warning tales. But what came next truly showed me how far I had risen. At a prestigious annual law conference in Miami, I was invited to be the keynote speaker. It was the event of the year. Executives, politicians, celebrities. As I stood backstage preparing to go on, Amanda approached me with an amused smile. "Guess who's in the audience?" she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "Victor." He sat quietly at a back table, surrounded by a few unfamiliar faces, looking nothing like the confident man he used to be. He had no company to represent, no title to flaunt. He was just there, watching. As I took the stage, I didn't falter. I spoke about leadership, about embracing challenges, and about turning obstacles into opportunities. I looked directly at Victor's table when I said, "Some will try to define you by your title, or worse, your silence. But remember, staying quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it means you're watching, learning, preparing to rewrite the story on your own terms." The applause was thunderous. Victor couldn't even look me in the eye. After the event, while mingling with guests, I overheard two young lawyers speaking excitedly. "Lauren Mitchell is a legend. Can you imagine being the person who underestimated her?" They laughed. I smiled quietly to myself. Meanwhile, Victor left early, slipping out unnoticed, almost like a ghost escaping his own funeral. But the humiliation didn't stop there. In the months that followed, word spread that Victor had attempted to apply for several corporate jobs, only to be rejected each time. His past followed him like a shadow he couldn't shake. The man who once claimed I didn't belong at the big table now couldn't even get invited into the room. His former friends distanced themselves. His family, especially his ambitious daughter, publicly praised my leadership and ethics in a business magazine interview. Imagine that, even. His own family recognized what he never could. Back at my firm, things couldn't have been better. We launched a nationwide scholarship fund in my name for women in law. We secured partnerships with tech giants and international corporations. Our success wasn't just in profit, it was in influence. Lauren Mitchell had become more than a name. I had become a symbol. Every once in a while, I'd get a LinkedIn notification. "Victor Lang viewed your profile." Each time I simply smiled and ignored it. He could watch from afar, just like the rest of them. Because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine. And mine was only getting bigger. By the second year of my leadership, the transformation was undeniable. The firm, once infamous for scandal and corruption, had become an industry darling. Headlines no longer mentioned the old regime. They were long forgotten. Now it was all about us, about me. Lauren Mitchell, the woman who changed everything. Those words appeared across magazines, business journals, and news broadcasts. Invitations flooded my inbox daily. Major universities asked me to guest lecture. Fortune 500 companies requested consultations on ethical leadership. I even filmed a segment for a national documentary about women breaking glass ceilings. My face, once hidden behind reception desks and meeting schedules, became the face of resilience and power. The office that Victor Lang once ruled like a dictator now felt entirely different. Employees thrived. We expanded into 8 major U.S. cities. Our revenue surpassed records previously thought impossible for our firm. Our name had gone global. We opened our first international office in London, and soon after, secured clients from Europe and Asia. Life felt surreal, but it was all earned. One evening, while attending a prestigious awards gala in New York City, I received the honor. That felt like the ultimate turning point. Business Leader of the Year. My name echoed through the grand ballroom as I stood to accept the award in front of the most powerful executives in the country. I delivered my speech with gratitude and grace, but when I reached the end, I let my truth shine. I was once dismissed as just a secretary. They thought I didn't belong at the table. But tonight, I stand before you as proof that the only thing more dangerous than being underestimated is proving them wrong. The standing ovation felt endless. That night, as I held the award in my hands, I knew something had shifted forever. I wasn't simply respected. I was untouchable. Meanwhile, the contrast between my rise and Victor's fall couldn't have been more brutal. Rumors about him surfaced occasionally, passed along quietly through old connections and whispers in corporate circles. After countless failed ventures, no firm would touch him. No investor would take his calls. His former allies, afraid of association, severed all ties. He became a cautionary tale that business students studied in ethics classes, not for his success, but for his spectacular downfall. One afternoon, Amanda sent me a link to a small local news article. Former law executive files for bankruptcy. It was Victor. He had lost everything. His properties, his investments, even the small consulting firm he tried desperately to keep afloat. He was done. Out of curiosity more than anything, I clicked on his name and found something both sad and poetic. His LinkedIn profile still read, "Former managing partner, Lang and Associates." No updates, no new ventures, just clinging to past glory that no longer mattered to anyone. In fact, the only people who still remembered Victor Lang were those who used his name as a punchline or warning. I never reached out. There was no need to. Watching him fade into obscurity while I stood at the top was all the closure I would ever need. Not long after, I found myself in a meeting with global leaders at a summit in Washington, D.C. As I sat at a round table with CEOs of the world's most powerful companies, it hit me. I didn't just rebuild the company, I rebuilt me. The woman they overlooked, mocked, and dismissed had become exactly what they feared most: unstoppable. That night, flying home in my private jet, a far cry from the cramped buses I used to take after long office hours, I toasted quietly to myself. This wasn't about revenge anymore. That chapter had closed long ago. This was about something far sweeter. Winning on my terms, leading with integrity, owning every room I walked into. I wasn't just Lauren Mitchell, CEO. I was Lauren Mitchell, icon. And Victor Lang? He was just a ghost in a story that belonged to me now. 3 years had passed since Victor Lang and his loyal cronies were escorted out of the firm in disgrace. What once felt like a dramatic victory had quietly evolved into something far greater. Victory wasn't the point anymore. Growth was. Legacy was. And I was creating mine, piece by piece. By now, Mitchell Global, yes, we had officially rebranded, wasn't just a law firm. It was an empire. We had offices in 12 countries, handled major corporate accounts from Fortune 100 companies, and built a mentorship pipeline that empowered thousands of young women in law. Major networks referred to me as one of the top 10 most influential women in business. Forbes called me the woman who rewrote corporate power. But none of those titles compared to the one I held every day when I stepped into my sleek, glass-walled office. Founder and CEO. It was mine, built not on shortcuts or dirty deals, but vision and resilience. One afternoon, while preparing for a company-wide virtual event celebrating our 10th international expansion, my assistant came into my office with a hesitant expression. "Lauren, I wasn't going to mention it, but Victor Lang requested to connect with you on LinkedIn." I paused for a moment, surprised not by the request, but by the fact he still existed in my world at all. "What did his profile say?" I asked casually. She pulled it up on her tablet. His headline read, "Consultant, former law executive, seeking new opportunities." His photo was outdated. His endorsements were non-existent. His connections, sparse. A sad digital footprint for a man who once held so much power. "Ignore it," I said simply, waving the screen away. "He's not part of this story anymore." And truly, he wasn't. While he sent desperate connection requests and applied to mid-level management jobs, I was preparing to deliver a global speech that would reach millions. That evening, I stood on stage, broadcasted live to everyone, of our offices around the world. My speech wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about how far I'd come or how many people I'd left behind. It was about what we built together. At Mitchell Global, I said, we believe power is not given. It's earned. It's earned in the late nights no one sees, in the risks others are too afraid to take, and in the quiet strength of those underestimated. We don't play the old games. We set new rules. The audience erupted with cheers. Employees messaged me from London, Singapore, and Toronto, expressing their gratitude for the culture we created. After the event, while walking back to my office, I passed the Hall of Portraits, our company's founders and leaders. Victor Lang's photo, once there, had long been removed after the scandal. In its place, mine. Lauren Mitchell, the first woman to lead, the architect of our Renaissance. I stood there quietly for a moment, reflecting not on the battles, but on the fact that they were over. I had won them all. Days later, during a lunch with industry friends, someone mentioned Victor's name in passing. One of the younger CEOs paused and asked innocently, "Who's Victor Lang?" The table went silent, then chuckled softly. He was already forgotten. That night, back in my penthouse apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my terrace. My phone buzzed with notifications. Articles praising our expansion, messages from mentees thanking me for breaking barriers, offers for speaking engagements. Not a single one about Victor, not a single whisper of his relevance. His final punishment wasn't being fired, bankrupt, or humiliated. It was being erased. He became what he feared most, a nobody. I, however, became something he never saw coming. A leader, a visionary, a legend. As the city lights flickered below me, I smiled to myself. His story ended long ago. Mine was still being written, brighter, bolder, and far beyond anything he could ever imagine. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in watching them fall. It's in rising so high, they can't even see you anymore.